Hello everybody, I'm Zenith and welcome back to In Retrospect, where I take a look at a video game that I completed on stream and that I want to talk about and discuss. Now, one thing I do want to make perfectly clear with these In Retrospect reviews is that this is not the be-all end-all review of the game. This is just my initial thoughts upon streaming and completing the game and thinking about it for a little while and compiling them together. This is not an in-depth analysis. This is not meant to be me shitting all over a game, and I feel like people with the Prince of Persia Sands of Time episode really didn't quite understand that, because I love Prince of Persia the Sands of Time, but this is also to gauge how well a video game aged over the years. Because, when you take a look at the stuff that I've talked about before with Kingdom Hearts 1 and Prince of Persia the Sands of Time, these are games that have aged to varying degrees, and Kingdom Hearts 1 had a lot of problems with its age, even though it's still fun to play, and Prince of Persia the Sands of Time, unfortunately, has not been updated with any re-releases outside of the PlayStation 3, which was not the best release. The original is actually probably better for your money, but even still, this is the one that I own and that I was playing, so this is what I took a look at. And I feel like when we're talking about how a game has aged, yeah, you can still look fondly on those memories, and at the time, it sure was amazing. Prince of Persia the Sands of Time, loved it for its time, but you still have to understand that things do age, and sometimes video games don't age very well. Now, the game that we're talking about today is one that I have personally been putting off for a very long time. Not because it's necessarily a bad game, although I do have lots of problems, but because this is a game that was made a very long time ago, and I'm not very good at retro games. Full disclosure, I grew up in the PlayStation 1, PS2 era. That's when I really started to get into games. I owned some Nintendo and Super Nintendo games, but I was never really good at them, and I was never really hardcore into games until the PS2, PS1 era. Meaning, I'm not used to that retro difficulty. I'm not used to putting myself through some of the toughest challenges, and this is where, I haven't played a lot of Mega Man. I haven't played a lot of these retro type games that were balls to the walls super hard, because that's not the type of game I was interested when I was a kid. I just did not have that drive to play those certain games. So with that being said, when I was asked to review the entire Ys series by Twilight Falchion, one of his original requests. He's requested a lot of games, and I will be getting to more of them as time goes on. Unfortunately, there have been some problems in making some of these reviews, and I think the biggest issue is that I do not really like the first Ys game. For those of you who don't know, Ys is a series, a long-running series by Nihon Falcom, that is, for all intents and purposes, turned into kind of a hack and slash fighting RPG series. It's really, really fun for later games, and when I first got some of these games, the first one I think was Ys, the Ark of Napishtim, which I believe is a remake of 4. Don't quote me on that. I'll look it up in a little bit, because we're not there yet. But the first one I ever played was Memories of Celceta, and that is a fantastic game. I know of the series, I'm intrigued by the series, I think it's a fantastic series, and I'm looking forward to playing the rest of the games in the franchise. What I was not prepared for was the fact that the first couple games in the series are radically different. And here's the thing, Ys 1, Ancient Ys Vanished, or also known as Ys the Vanished Omens, was created in 1987 for PC 8801 systems. For those who don't know, those are home computer systems back in the day, so this was very, very old school. And it was later ported to normal PC. It was later brought to PSP and Nintendo DS. But I personally played the Steam version for this on the enhanced Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles, I believe. There's a lot of different versions of this game, and most of it is because Ys 1 and Ys 2 were originally designed to be one game. However, the stuff that they wanted to put in the game was too big, so they ended up splitting it into two titles, and that kind of really hurt the game in a lot of ways. But if you're picking up the game now, they have bundles with Ys 1 and 2. I suggest the Steam version. I believe it's Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles, and you can choose which layout you want. It essentially allows you to choose if you want the updated graphics and whatnot for the layout of the characters, and it includes a new opening cutscene that is really, really good, updated music, because while the original, like, the music for the game is fantastic, it's been updated as the years go by so that it's not, like, all compressed in MIDI. So if you're going to get it on Steam. It's pretty cheap, and it is worth your money. Now, the biggest problem I have is that this does not feel like a complete experience. And I have to treat it like a single game because it was released as a single game, but this is one of those games that ends right when it's starting to get interesting, and it takes a while to get going. The game centers around a man named Adol Kristen, who washes up on the shore of a distant town, which is surrounded by this thing called a storm wall. It is a magical wall that has been protecting them for a very long time, but it keeps trade to a minimum. It means that they can't leave that land, pretty much, and monsters have started appearing ever since the storm wall materialized. So the townsfolk are kind of very poor right now. They used to be a very big silver trading town, but because they can't trade with anyone in the port outside of the other cities, it kind of dried up. There was this whole big mine. It was very, very profitable, but now the people are basically farmers, and they're not as well off as they used to be. So Adol is tasked with figuring out what the Stormwall is, trying to solve the various problems of Ys, basic RPG stuff. Now, the setup I found was very interesting, and it does have this very old school RPG feel to it, where you're landed in the town, you get to talk to the rest of the townspeople, and there's a lot of stuff that you can do specifically in that first village, and it very much harkens to stuff like Pokemon or Final Fantasy 1 or these old school RPGs where you find yourself in a town, you have to solve the problems. The difference here is that you don't exactly get a lot of direction on where you need to go and what you need to do, and it's one of those very old RPG like mechanics where you are allowed to do what you need to do, but there's a lot of vaguity, and I think that was my biggest problem. When I was streaming it, I had Twilight in the stream with me, and I had to ask him, like, when I was lost, okay, where do I go? Because he's played the games to death. He knows what's going on, but I had a lot of problems just trying to figure out where you need to go. I explored the entire town, I found, like, the equipment, I bought some stuff, but the first mistake that I made before I even did that was I went out to the main overworld where the monsters are, and I did not equip my sword because I didn't know how to do it. And the thing is, the game doesn't tell you immediately that you don't have your weapon equipped. So I was starting to fight, and I was getting destroyed. Like, I'm like, I have the equipment, why am I getting destroyed? Well, you haven't equipped them, and it's not so simple to equip them. You have to go to a specific sub-menu. Very old school. But the other hurdle comes with the fighting itself. The first two games, as far as I know, I don't know the rest of the games, but I know the battle system changes. But the first two games have what they call the bump system. Now, this is an interesting experimental battle system. What you have to do is you have to run to an enemy, and your character will automatically attack them, but you have to do so at kind of an angle or slightly to the side. Otherwise, you're going to be attacked by the enemy as well. It is, to an extent, a very mobile battle system, and it's interesting in certain ways because you can run circles around enemies and destroy them pretty quickly, which, if you get the hang of where to position yourself, it becomes very fast and very fluid and very fun. But more often than not, I found myself walking into enemies and have them like chipping off major chunks of my health, even though I'm like going at them at the right angle. It's a finicky system, and I feel like it could have been refined, but it's one of those things where you're either doing really, really well or you're not. It is fun, it is different, and I did get used to it after a while. But I always found myself like clashing with enemies every so often, and these areas are crawling with respawning enemies. If you go off screen a little bit and come back, the enemies will respawn. So if you find yourself in the middle of a dungeon and you position yourself wrong and you find your health dwindling, well, first of all, your health does not regenerate in dungeons, it regenerates in the overworld. So you're going to have problems there, but you're also going to have to find your way back because the enemies keep respawning and they get in your way. It's a system that can be very frustrating, and it's a system that is also very interesting. It's a double-edged sword, I feel, because on the one hand, once I got the hang of it and I was, positioning myself right, I was having fun. But also, I don't like the concept of not being able to heal in dungeons. You can get an item called the heal ring, but that takes up your slot. There's various different types of rings, some that increase your attack, some that increase your defense, but you can only equip one, and I always found myself equipping the heal ring because it allows you to heal in dungeons, and you heal by just waiting and standing still. This would be fine if there weren't respawning enemies everywhere, so you can't always stand still in most areas, and so that's where the annoyance really comes in. It's not kind of like, it's not like a turn-based RPG where I can just use a potion, because while healing items are available, they're not very abundant, and the game seems to want you to use that fast healing in dungeons just by waiting, which kind of kills the pace a little bit. And the other problem is that in boss rooms, you cannot heal your character. The problem with that, aside from the fact that you're not allowed to heal whatsoever as soon as you enter the boss room, is that many of these bosses have really cheap tactics. The first boss in the game is one who appears in fire. Like, the room is filled with a bunch of different flamethrowers, and your task is to defeat him, but he is able to stand in the path of a flamethrower and not get hit. And so, essentially, in order to damage him, you have to get damaged yourself, and you can't heal in that boss room. And so that kind of, to me, is very frustrating. The bosses are a very mixed bag, too. They're very... Some are very easy. Some I found like I could beat in 5 seconds. And then there are bosses that took me 4 hours. 4 hours for one boss. And the difficulty curve just... It is constantly over the place. And it's not like something that you can grind to get better. This is a skill-based game. Yeah, you can level up every so often, but you're capped at level 10 because this is the first half of the game split into two. So you can only level up to level 10, which is not nearly enough, even with the best equipment in the game, which you'll get pretty much halfway through the game. It always feels like you're underpowered. And you have to constantly keep switching equipment because the final boss, you need silver equipment to defeat him, even damage him, but it's not the best equipment in the game, so you're kind of nerfing your strength a little bit. But let's talk about the real problem bosses in the game. There are some that, you can walk through. They have a very simple pattern. Like there's these like heads that operate kind of like brick breaker blocks that just go screensaver around the screen, and your job is to just avoid their shield around them, and it gets easier as time goes on because their shield whittles down. So that I found interesting, and I thought it worked. But then there's Vagulian. Vagulian is, oh my god, he is the poster child of how not to design a boss in a video game. Now, there are good things about his design. He's basically a giant vampire. He can turn into various bats, so you can't harm him, and the bats harm you when he's in that form. The problem is, he only materializes for 1 split second, and you have to know where he's going to materialize, and in that second, you have to run in, straight at him, hit him in the stomach, and get out of the way. It is a very, very long battle, and you can only do so much damage to him, and you have to basically lure him to one side, one corner, where he's going to materialize, jump in that 1 split second, damage him, and get out of the way. I would be fine if there was more time to hit him, but it's so fast that half the time you'll go through him and you'll damage yourself, and you have to make sure that you know the exact second that he's going to materialize, because that's all you have. And there were times I swore I hit him, but it didn't register. And it just, that design is so, it's archaic to me. I know to some people they're used to this really old school challenge of these bosses, but to me, I spent so much on just this one boss. And I've played this game twice, to the point where I was tearing my hair out. Like, I've beaten this game before, and I just wanted to put it down every time I got to Vagulian, and the final boss of the game, Dark Fact. Although he is not known as Dark Fact in Japan, the actual pronunciation of his name is Dark Fucked. And so you enter that room, you're fucked. Now, on his own, Dark Fact is not a bad boss. He has some heavy-hitting magic, and he has some things that, if it was any other boss, I would be fine with. The biggest problem with Dark Fact is that the floor collapses underneath you every time he takes a hit. Every single time you hit him, the floor crumbles away, meaning you have less of the arena and less time to hit him. And if you're on that space, it's an insta-kill. Insta-kill move in the final boss. So it's like, alright, I gotta be careful. No, you're constantly being hit by these projectiles that you can't block. Basically, you're surrounded by this magic energy, so you have to go in and be aggressive and hit him, but you have to make sure that you don't destroy so much of the arena that you get trapped and you won't be able to finish him without an insta-kill. It is one of those, like, you're damned if you go aggressive and you're damned if you don't, because you don't have enough defense to withstand a long assault against him. The good thing is that he moves in a very predictable pattern. The problem is that he moves very, very fast, and I had to change the settings on the game to slow down his animations to make him easier to fight, simply because that's the only way I could significantly get hits on him. Yeah, you can predict where he's gonna be, but he moved so fast that it's very hard to position and maneuver around him without the insta-kill. And there have been several times fighting Dark Fact where I would just get trapped on like 4 small like squares, and he would still have his health bar, meaning that there was no way I would be able to defeat him, so I had to keep reloading the save. This game is not very long. This game, I completed it in 4 sessions, but the last 2 sessions were 4 hours each because I was fighting Vigulian and Dark Fact, and their tactics are just so cheap. There is no way to adequately prepare for these bosses without fighting them over and over and over and learning their strategy and their patterns. I had people in the stream giving me some advice, and I was following it, and it didn't work, and I kept going back and trying and trying. 4 hours later, I beat him. But it's one of those things where the bump system and the boss's design are so archaic and experimental that they end up hurting the experience. Because otherwise, I like this game. It's a pretty interesting, well thought out RPG with an interesting story about 2 goddesses and another world that, that we'll get to in the second game. There's 2 worlds. One is the normal Earth, and then there's one that's floating above, and it's connected via the tower that you face the final boss of this game in. But, the game ends before you get any explanation on what is going on, because it's the first half of an experience. And that's where I really have to fault the game. If I was allowed to grind to level, 25 or 50, like in the second game, I wouldn't have any problem facing some of these bosses. I would have higher defense. I would have better equipment. And in the second game, you get items where you can use magic to attack from afar, which eliminates a lot of the stress. And so when we get to Ys 2, I'm probably going to be singing a very different tune, but Ys 1 feels experimental and incomplete. I like Adel as a character, and I like going around and beating the various townspeople and seeing what's going on and, exploring the mine and the rest of the area. But the things that really hold it back, the bump system, again, it's a double-edged sword. I both like and don't like it because it's problematic. The pacing of the game is so bad because you'll be spending a lot of your time just running around, doing stuff in the town, and then after 2 hours, you'll get a bunch of dungeons and bosses, one after another, and then you'll have this long dungeon tower. It's not paced very well. The difficulty is all over the place. There were times where I felt prepared and I was fine, and there were times where I didn't think that I was going to be able to complete this game. Now, granted, I'm stubborn. Even though I'm not good at old school games, I completed this as best as I could. I beat Dark Fact. I completed the game, but I just don't feel like it was worth completing. This is one of those games that you need to play in order to understand the story of later games, in order to understand Ys 2, but this is really the worst game in the series from where I'm standing so far, and I don't have a lot of good things to say about it. This is the Assassin's Creed 1 of the Ys series. It has a lot of good ideas, but there's so much wrong with it that you might just want to skip to the second game. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I know that the Ys series is good because I do love Celceta, and I do know where the game goes later on in the series, but this is not a good start to me. And it does feel very incomplete, and I have to treat them as 2 different games because that's how they were released back in 1987. So, I'm sorry, Twilight, I'm not a big fan of this. It has not aged very well at all, and it doesn't function the way I would like it to. Ys 2 is a lot better, and I'm currently working on streaming through it. I'm not sure if that's going to be the next review or not, but overall, I would say just watch a Let's Play of this one, because it's a good game, but it has so many problems that holds it back to the point where I just didn't want to keep going. it's only about a 3-4 hour experience. It's a very short game, but you're going to find yourself stuck on bosses and these design elements that just do not hold up in today's day and age. And it's, some people may be able to get into it, but I feel like a lot of people are going to get so frustrated by it that they're not going to want to finish. But, watch a Let's Play, see if you like it. You may have a different opinion on the game. I do recommend the Steam version, though, instead of the PSP or the DS versions. The PSP is okay, but the DS version has a different battle system that's actually worse. So, just play the Steam version. It's cheaper, and it's more worth your time and money than the other versions. With that being said, the music of Ys is simply fantastic. I highly recommend you check out the soundtrack for this game because it is simply phenomenal. It is one of the best game soundtracks. And all of the Ys games have fantastic music. Celceta was bundled with this Legacy of Ys compilation that has remastered tracks from the entire series, and every single song is a joy to behold. So if there's anything to take away from this game, it's an interesting RPG with a fantastic soundtrack, and problematic gameplay. A lot of it hasn't held up, but graphically and presentation-wise and musically, it has been brought to us in a much better condition these days. It's still not the best game out there, but I still think, watch a Let's Play, watch the game in action, buy the soundtrack. That's my official opinion, because this game has not aged well at all. Anyway, I'm Zenith Rule. I will see you guys next time. You have a fantastic day, and be sure to check out that soundtrack. I'm telling you, it is worth your time. Have a good one, guys.
Hey, this is Megami33. Thank you for watching Zenith Will Review. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. If you like what you see, check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/ZenithWillReview.